If you want a real life example of how the universe can conspire to help anything that you set your mind to, an intention that you have, or what some people would call manifestation, this is a podcast that will really illuminate that process and also reframe the way that you might look at competition and find out that when you reframe that idea, you might actually be able to compete better and win better. Colin, Guinn, and Christie Woods are 2-time Amazing Race veterans. The first time they went and they almost won, but they were much different people back then. And then through years of their own personal growth, they went back again and they won the damn thing. And so it was really cool to talk to them about their journey from the first time to the second time. And as well, Colin Guinn is Whitney's brother. So I've gotten to watch their own personal transformation throughout the years. So really excited to share this podcast with you and open you up to all of the ideas they have to express. Colin Guinn, Christie Woods. Now, this is an interesting podcast because not only are you guys, well, you're kind of celebrities because you were on The Amazing Race twice. And the last time you won, which is an incredibly interesting story, tracking the transition that you guys have made in your own interpersonal growth and intrapersonal growth. That's a really interesting story. But what else is an interesting story is you're Whitney's brother and sister-in-law, which most of you who listen to my podcast should know who Whitney is by this point. So it's cool. We got a lot to talk about, and I'm really looking forward to it. So thanks for stopping by, guys.
Man, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks for having us.
For sure. So, all right. You guys were just kind of doing your thing, and then you get this idea to go on The Amazing Race. How long ago was that?
The first time we went on the race was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And actually they reached out. I had been Miss Teen USA. So they were
So
casting.
you had your first little taste of that celebrity, you know, in the camera's eye kind of moment there, young.
Yeah. I mean, pretty young. Season 5.
Well, no, I'm talking about Miss Teen USA.
Oh, Miss Teen USA, yeah.
What are you, 19, 18?
I was 18 when I won.
18? Mm-hmm.
That was an
That's like
interesting
Justin Bieber.
experience.
That's young, you know? Like
yeah.
how do you handle that
Yeah,
kind of
for
fame?
sure. I didn't. It was like immediately I realized, oh, wow, I know now that I just didn't have any roots. I didn't have that support that I didn't realize was required when you get thrust into the limelight in that way. So I was doing the best I could to keep my head above water. Yeah. I did move to LA. I did some acting, and I did a television series called New Adventures of Robin Hood. Lived in Lithuania 6 months out of the year filming that. It came on TNT. It was brilliant. I played Rowena, a sorcerer's apprentice. Christopher Owen was the magician I learned from. So that was pretty cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. So then that kind of led to getting called for The Bachelor, Bachelorette, all that kind of stuff. And in those days, you just didn't do reality television if you were an actor. But I'd gone back to school and meanwhile met this handsome guy. And we'd moved to Corpus, graduated from college. And I got a call from a show called The Amazing Race that I'd never heard of. And just kind of turned it down right away. And then came home, said to him, oh, there's another show that called. He looks it up, sees that we're traveling around the world. We're doing all of these challenges that are based on the culture and, I mean,
adrenaline.
Yeah, exactly.
It was so in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like no, you don't understand.
Undeniable ask.
This is not Bachelorette, okay? Yeah. We are doing this thing if we can.
Yeah.
So I called her back and I said, you know what? I changed my mind. We might be interested in doing that after all.
Yeah.
But then you still got to go through the whole process. You got to make a tape and, you know, they do the whole narrow down. And we went from not caring to, as we went through the process, like, really getting invested and be like, we really want to be one of the teams.
Which
that
I'm
get
sure
to do
the
this.
producers want. And especially like a little bit of emotional unbalance, you know, they could smell that in you. Your hunger to win, your inability to handle pressured situations in the optimal way. They're like, these guys are going to be great.
They're going to be perfect.
Yeah, ultimately, I think we got cast because the video we made, and this was real, we end up arguing at the end of the video. Like,
and that's like as it fades out.
As it fades out. And they're like, yes, you're in.
These guys are perfect.
Yeah. Two type A's. Here we go.
And they would ask, what's your main argument that everything. It doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter what it is.
Occasionally we're not fighting for small amounts of time.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's interesting how much that idea of conflict really grabs people's attention. And I think it goes back to our like evolutionary biology of when there was conflict in the tribe, like everybody needed to pay attention to that because the survival of the tribe depended upon these situations that could be explosive and could derail the tribe from like their own survivability at a certain level, right?
That's right. So it's like high stakes.
It's high stakes.
Yeah.
Well, now it's not as high stakes because everybody's kind of individualized. We all have our own sources of income typically, and we're not in these communities or tribes, but we're still hardwired that when we see drama amongst people, like we just can't take our eyes away.
We pay attention.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's so true. And they go through a casting process where they're not just looking at the dynamics of the teammates, they're looking at the inner dynamics of the teams that are actually going on the race, how they will show up. So we do multiple personality tests, IQ tests, physical tests. They want to make sure you're actually mentally stable. You may not look mentally stable, but they want to make sure you are.
Just stable enough.
Just stable enough. Exactly.
Like not going to punch anybody stable enough. But
and I think that's what they were
goes.
expecting the second time around, was kind of more of the same, like
Well, we got to tell people the first.
A's.
We got to tell people what happened on this first one because. Tell us like go through this first thing. Like how did it go?
Yeah, so it was a blast, and I looked at it as like this is an opportunity to potentially win $1 million in a month, and we should win at all costs. And we should think about nothing else but winning.
That's what a man knows. That's really what we're taught, right? Like
and
from the start.
I'm gonna pretend like there's no cameras here, and I like TV, whatever. I'm gonna do these challenges, and we're winning $1 million. And ultimately, I think I burned us out by the end because really it's kind of more of an how much resilience can you have in place in those last couple of legs. And are you going to get thrown off your game such that you just make stupid mistakes? Can you get enough sleep along the way? Can you, keep your center, which by the end, we couldn't. And we kind of self-destructed. So, we won more legs than anyone had ever won. We ultimately, we were kind of the dominant team of the show. But on the last leg, we ended up getting second place, which is, first loser.
You guys kind of got fucked in that, though.
I mean, I think it was, it definitely was one of the things that you'd say maybe there was some vibrational stuff going on because it was like we were never going to win that last leg.
Right.
We were never going to win that last leg.
But it was a flat tire that
right.
ultimately cost you the race. But that's that interesting thing where you can get into, well, was that flat tire perfect chance? Maybe. Or was it the fact that things were happening as they were supposed to happen? I don't know what your metaphysical belief system is, but I would probably say that your guys' metaphysical belief system is you weren't ready and supposed to win that race at that point.
That's right.
No, actually, when I look back on it, the fact that even coming back 15 years later, it was sort of, if you're looking at it from that kind of higher metaphysical state, this was a story arc that literally was over 15 years. Season 5 of The Amazing Race was the first time they hadn't cast a male alpha team. We were that alpha team. They specifically put us in there to be that. They knew we would be uber competitive and that we would win at all costs and that we would be fighting each other every step of the way. I don't even think they realized, though, how good we actually would be. And there for a while, they were kind of like, oh, no, they're just going to win our show and this is going to be boring and not fun. So ultimately, coming in second on that last leg was perfect for them because it kind of played this beautiful antagonist, protagonist, energetically, vibrationally. I mean, we weren't there. We weren't doing any of the work. We were winning basically based on our pure physical ability, and force, exactly. And then coming back 15 years later, having gone through our own personal development and also a huge transformation in our relationship. I mean, really kind of going from level 1 to level 3 in terms of Tony Robbins' relationship style, and having a much bigger intention and a much higher motivation for wanting to go back on and really say, hey, you know what? Can we, at an energetic level, really work with and mold the energy such that the momentum is so great that by the time we do get to that last leg, there's no way we're not going to win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. And I want to definitely dive into your own growth process that allowed you to transition to that. But just talking about, there was more that kind of happened as the show came out. The reality show thing did the reality show thing, right? Like it made the specific little tricky cuts that painted you guys as absolutely the villains of the show. And this is done by producers after all the recording. They kind of create the narrative that they want based on actual footage. You know, obviously they have to use footage. But they make a story, and the story they wanted to make was that you guys were the assholes.
No, it was perfect because they know the entire outcome before they cut the first episode.
Yeah.
So it's great. They know how it's all going to end. So then they can build this beautiful story arc. And why do you don't want everyone rooting for the team that gets second place. You want everyone rooting for the team that ultimately wins, right?
Feeling good when you guys get the flat tire.
That's exactly right.
And so they have the famous scene from that was the scene where you're in some like rice field with an ox.
Yes, yeah. My ox is broken, which became like a book and a website and shirts, and it was like a big thing. I thought I was just being funny. You know, I knew that the ox can't actually be broken.
Did you think you were just being
funny? So tell people what the challenge was.
So we get to this. So it was actually the leg of the race where the other teams all ganged up on us and decided they were going to try to slow us down using this thing at that time called the yield, which basically slowed another team down by like 20 minutes. And that really took us off our game. I couldn't get to a state of forgiveness. I was in like oppression and victim, and I can't believe it. And we've been helping these other teams this entire time, and they all backstabbed us. And so I'm totally in my head. We're in our heads. We get to this rice field where it's like, guide this ox around and have the plow try to dig up this clue that's somewhere in this rice field. Well, we got there behind the other teams, and either they didn't show us, or somehow, and again, going to your first point, was it just a random chance, or was it always going to work out this way? But somehow we don't end up learning that one team member can guide the ox while the other team member does the plow. All the other teams do it in that fashion. We think that one team member is not allowed to even be a part of it at all, and she has to stand on the sidelines. The other team. So I have the ox's reins and the plow, but they will only.
I can do it all.
That's right. That's right.
I got this, Christie. Don't worry.
Yeah.
You stay in the back.
That's right.
Leave it to me, the best racer of all time.
That's right. And
you're welcome, everybody.
And the fun part is, you can only put the reins on the left side of the ox. They will not let you put it on the right side. So I'm in New Orleans here, except for my ox only turns left. And I'm basically water skiing behind this ox that's just dragging me around this field for, I think we were there for like 53 minutes until Christie is like, I'm just going to go walk around in this field and try to find it, and literally steps on the clue within like 3 minutes. Good work there for the last 50 minutes getting drug around the ox. Here's your clue, bud.
Yeah, exactly.
And meanwhile, you say your famous line as you're water skiing behind the ox.
Yes.
My ox is broken.
It would only turn left, and it kept trying to leave the field. It was definitely a broken ox.
Like, I just want to go home, bro. Like, I'm not broken. I'm just like tired.
I'm just doing my thing.
That's it. Would you just stop yelling at me?
Just let me ox.
Yeah.
So all right. So you guys finished second place, get cast as the villains. How was that emotionally when the show came out and you're like, damn, we're looking like a couple assholes here?
I knew that that's where it was going. We were I think it was the Egypt leg where we were able to finagle getting in even sooner than most of the crew, almost beat the host into Egypt, because in those days the airport strategy was a big deal. And so really working the airport strategy and any new flight we could take and just doing everything that we could. Well, next thing you know, we're 12 hours ahead of team number 2. And along the way, we end up taking a fast forward and we get into an argument. 5-minute argument, whatever, it doesn't make a difference. We end up getting first place on that leg. Either way, we would do an interview at the end of every leg, and they're focusing on the argument the entire time. Like, nothing about the fact that we got 12 hours ahead. Like
a
this
3-day
was
leg.
Phenomenal racing, right? And I pulled Colin aside and I looked at him. I said, "You know you're the villain." "What?" He couldn't imagine it. He's like, what do you mean? I help all the teams. I love everybody. I'm like, no. This is reality television. You're going to be a one-dimensional character, and you can tell by the questions they're asking, you are the villain. Like, get that through your head. So when you think about this when you're making these decisions that you're doing. Well, of course, that takes us to Africa, where he almost goes to jail because he's fighting the taxi cab driver over $50.
Yeah, there's no good excuses for that one.
Because
that's actually my low point.
That was the lowest point, really. Yeah. And, the driver's driving on a donut, yes. And was it, the day before, it was a much cheaper ride to the same place. But at the same time, it's like, he just wants to make his money. He's just a taxi driver in Africa. And Colin's like, no, I'm willing to fight this out and possibly risk missing our flight. But anyway, so I had told him already.
In there somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. There's a handful.
Yeah.
There's a couple.
So I had told him, look, you're the villain. And it wasn't until we were actually watching the show unfold and it would be over and he would kind of give me that look like, oh, wow, you were right. And I was just, that's when I would get triggered, was watching the show and obviously thinking about what is everyone else thinking. I had ex-boyfriends call me like, where was that Christie? Because they kind of painted me into this doormat, because having been in pageants, I'd sort of been trained in media and I kind of knew where they were taking us. So I'd kind of give them nothing and Colin would give them everything. So it would look like he was just this raging, abusive guy and I'm just kind of meek in the, looking out the window.
And then they amplify all that, of course, Of
course.
So I think you realize that you're the villain when we get home. And I think he slept on the couch after every single episode.
And this is
like self-imposed, or was that?
No. This is not self-imposed. And this is like 6 months later that it starts airing, right? We're on with our life. And then it starts airing and she's like, you're on the couch, bud. Like,
I can't even look at you.
I can't even look at your face. I told you this was going to happen. And I vehemently disagreed during that. I was like, no chance. They have to show the whole story. And she's like, you idiot.
Yeah.
So that was tough, man.
I bet. And that
tough.
also goes to
I was getting hate mail and, from all over the world. I mean, it was like,
really,
it was hardcore, like threats and like, you're the ugly American that gives America, and it was all like, true, you know what I mean? So it was like pretty painful.
Kind of true.
From what they saw.
Yeah.
From the picture that was portrayed, I did not make Americans look good. And a lot of the things I actually did not make Americans look good. So I mean it was just tough to like get all that reflection.
So that's a huge, that's a huge opportunity to grow. Just receiving that and how you respond from that. And for you, that embarrassment probably was something that's, a lot of people have that kind of social embarrassment being the most, the thing that's actually the hardest. Like you talk to couples who've had, infidelity, and oftentimes the embarrassment to the peers or the embarrassment to the public is actually harder than the fact that, your partner was unfaithful or whatever happened in there. It's when people know, then it becomes even harder because we so guard our ego, so guards our reputation as if it's our life.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely my ego that had you sleeping on the couch for sure. And it was really the idea that I had been Miss Teen USA and I had even been cast on the show because of it. And then here was my relationship, which just was not a relationship you'd be striving for, just laid out on television in the most ugly, shadowy sort of way for all to see. And it was almost more than I could bear. It was definitely a low point in our relationship.
Yep.
Not actually running the race, but watching the race.
Running the race, not so bad. Yeah, it was great, actually. It was super fun.
And what's interesting about the race is that it was so devastating to our relationship at that time that we watched it when it aired, and then that was that. We never talked about the race. We never watched it again. It was like completely as if we had never done it.
Yeah.
And
it was traumatic.
It was traumatic. Yeah. And we did not
even... You guys are going to the F1 and you're like, do you want to go to the thing where the cars go around in circles?
Yeah.
Because he won't say the word race.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. So it was interesting that a year and a half ago, I was looking up family shows. We have a 7 and a 12-year-old now, boys who love watching competition shows. And I was looking up top-rated family shows, and Amazing Race pops up. And I'm like, we haven't watched Amazing Race since it aired, and our boys have never seen our season, obviously. And I looked at Colin and I thought, Amazing Race is top-rated family show, and the boys love competition shows. They've never seen our season.
Your boys happen after the race.
Yes.
Right. So
the first one came 4 years after we did our first race.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because we were already deep down. I mean, I was already coaching. We were, transforming our relationship.
So talk about the years in between. Obviously, you have to, go through that whole process, which has growth just naturally, inherently, whatever struggle that comes to you.
I don't think there was much growth for me.
There wasn't
it was
that
like
much
a
growth,
lot
huh?
of like denial and blame of the editors and being the victim and, looking at the things that they chose not to show and knowing that I really did help those people. So the polarity, there was a lot of good and there was a lot of bad. All the bad was shown, all the bad was amplified. And so I wanted to only look at all the good that I did and complain that it wasn't shown. And so there wasn't a whole lot of self-reflection or realization. And so I continued those patterns for many years.
Yeah. So when do you guys think the growth started then for
this
you?
guy I knew took us to Peru and we did ayahuasca about 5 or 6 years ago.
What a crazy character that guy must have been.
Actually, I was tracking it, and then after the race, probably the next lowest point in our relationship was the rise and fall of DJI. So I left my company. I was doing sports marketing to go be Colin's director of operations as he was becoming the CEO of DJI North America and literally inventing the Phantom and that whole thing. And there we were working together for the first time again. So we were in college together, went to school, got along brilliantly. Then we did the race. That was not good. And then we kind of went our separate ways. We kind of had our own, I'll go do my job, you do yours, we'll meet at the end of the day kind of thing. And so now we're working together and I'm sort of his right-hand woman. And it does not go well at all. I mean, we're right back to where we started, this friction of who's going to be alpha, who's going to be in charge, who's telling who what to do. And
this may be 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And it
when I just met you guys, DJ, that was still going on. So it had to be like 7 years ago still, where that was still on the rise. Because I remember watching your congressional hearing where you were brought in about drone safety when they were worried that like drones were going to, I don't know, run into fucking helicopters or something.
Yeah,
I don't know
what crazy shit that drones can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when he left DJI to go start 3DR, which was his next company, that was when I bowed out. I was like, nope, I can't work with you. I can't work for you. Like, this isn't going to happen. And that was the first time in my life since I was 16 that I hadn't worked. So that I had actual time on my hands to just sit and be. And that was about 6 years ago. And in the process, it just became very obvious. Something's really wrong. Something's really wrong with, like, on the outside, everything looks really good. But really on the inside, in this relationship and internally here, something's really wrong. And we've got to start taking a look at that. So that's when it starts. That's when I I was going back to school I originally wanted to be a psychiatrist. Had gone into corporate communications, thank goodness, because that's how I met Colin at UT. But this was my opportunity to go back into what I really wanted to do, and happened upon life coaching and really fell in love with that. And the whole idea of deep diving into the self and optimizing who you could be. This is where I get introduced to Abraham Hicks and Joe Dispenza, and really deep diving into self-love and integrating pieces of the body-mind that are literally stuck in the past, learning about vibration, frequency. And I start bringing that into our relationship. It's when I start meditating for the first time. I start doing energy work that has nothing to do with him. Like, it was literally like I started playing with the energy. So he would come home, kind of be in work mode, be grumpy, whatever, leave the room. And I would go into a meditation and start kind of like 5 senses reality, imagining how I wanted him to show up and what it could look like. And I started really getting into the sensory of that. And then he'd walk into the room and he'd be a totally different person. It would blow my mind.
And what was your take on things at that point? because obviously this is a different world than anything that you'd been exposed to. So your wife's going down this pathway of exploring all these avenues. What was your thoughts about it at that point?
You know, it's really interesting how it all, I think, worked out. My family were all hippies growing up. My dad, who was a physician, was also like hardcore hippie and told me about telepathic experiences that he had had and out of body experiences that he'd had, you know, going through medical school. And so like we would go down to Real de Catorce and everybody was, you know, going on plant medicine journeys down there in the desert. And so I kind of grew up in that world and was like open to all of it, but not really like, you know, and I had done the forum and I had been going to Esalen and doing like Jamie Wheels courses, you know.
So you had some light exposure to it.
I had like some light exposure to it, but I was fairly disconnected to it. And I think there was like a big part of my ego that was like, I'm not so sure. I'm pretty sure that's all bullshit. And, you know, really it's about what can you do in the world? What can you get done? You know what I mean? And like, so I had this exposure to it and I had this openness to it, but I think there was like a big part of my ego that was just kind of like, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm buying it. And then I saw like, as she was really bringing this into the house and how much she was changing and shifting, I remember thinking like, oh yeah, like I can see how this movie plays out. Like, it's not going to be long until she's like, yeah, cool, bro. You can be here stuck in your ego. I'm out. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Because she was evolving.
She was evolving.
You either had to evolve with her.
You're either going to evolve with her,
or you get the permanent couch.
That's it. Or you get the permanent couch. And like, it was just very objectively like, you know, that's for sure how this plays out. Like we're not going to be in this drama triangle anymore. And like, so I had like a little context around, you know, like I said, like, you know, I had some light exposure to it. And so, yeah, it just seemed like that was the obvious path. And I think, you know, kind of from a philosophical standpoint, I wanted to be, you know, connected and open. And like, we had been watching The Secret since it first came out and What the Bleep Do You Know? And like, being like in sales all my life and like Fake It Till You Make It. And, you know, that there's a lot of sales concepts, and even like Think and Grow Rich, the Napoleon Hill book from like the 30s. Mm-hmm. You know, I had read that, you know, in my sales career days. And so there was kind of like, I was like, hey, I'm the one that's supposed to be into all this stuff. You know what I mean? And here she is like really embodying this and like really shifting. And so, yeah, I think it was a why in the road for me to say, I'm either going to have to make this a priority and try to keep up and actually do some inward work here to grow with her, or she's going to vibrate out of my existence.
And that's something that a lot of couples face, because it's typically not both parties in the relationship that are going to be like, hey, together, we're both independently at the same time going to decide to embark on.
We both suck and we need to get better.
Usually like somebody leads, like somebody goes first.
Yeah.
And like that person who says, okay, I'll go first. And that's the courageous and right act, and to trust that if your partner is meant to be your partner, they'll join you when you kind of show them, not like tell them about it. That's like if you telling him about it wasn't going to really do shit.
And I would try.
But you showing him,
yes,
that's something that becomes undeniable.
For sure. I would get really excited and want to share some of the stuff that I was learning, and he would get defensive. He would reject it. I mean, we've talked about that. There was like this, as there has always been in our relationship, this underlying competition, like who's going to be more conscious now, you know? And I didn't know that was really going on. This is something that you sort of opened up to me about. Whereas for me, I was just feeling this sense of relief for the first time in forever, because I have battled anxiety and depression my entire life. So what I was reading about vibration and all of this was like, it made sense to me. It suddenly, the world made sense when before it didn't at all. So I was really excited to share it with him. But prior to that all happening, our house had flooded. And I was living in Barton Creek, the
using
hotel.
Your charger.
Yeah.
To fill up the car.
Yes.
Yep.
And he was traveling. So I was living there with the boys, and we were just not communicating. I mean, kind of out of sight, out of mind when he was traveling, total lack of intimacy in the relationship, and just feeling so like rock bottom, lonely. And I would say that I for sure had what I would call a dark night of the soul. Like it was just an absolute, because what I realized was how much I was attached to Colin, how much like who I was was attached to Colin. He was my family. He was my everything. And I had to get to this space where I literally thought of, if I am homeless with my children on the side of the road, like that's better than this. And that letting go, that sort of surrender, it was like, I breathed for the first time. And suddenly it was like, likely, I had no context then, but my crown just sort of opened and there was a flood of consciousness that comes in, and I could see our relationship and the way it was playing out and my part in the play. How I was showing up was contributing to just this very awful, conflicting kind of relationship. And that was when, like literally the next day, I ended up watching a video that had to do with vibration and Dr. Emoto's experiment with water. And it really spoke to me, and then went on this YouTube deep dive into learning more about what ultimately the very first coaching certification I go through, which ends up being this deep dive into my own self-reflection, and then starting to introduce all of these practices that I was doing on my own and that he was responding to. But to get to that place, I knew I had to have a resolve that I might lose my relationship with Colin. Like, this might actually be the end, but I know that this is what I have to do. Yeah. And either he will respond and we might, because at one point we were attracted to each other. At one point we were completely resonant when we were in a beautiful space. So it was sort of like, I'm going to get back there. And I know that if he got back there, we would be resonant again, but he may or may not. And I have to be okay with that.
Yeah. You always have to let go. You always have to surrender. Yep. And that's actually probably a good segue into, we all went and did ayahuasca together at some point somewhere in that time frame, maybe edged a little bit later than that, a little bit along
not
the
far
path.
After that.
But it's the same thing with any plant medicine journey too. It's like the power comes from the opposite thing that you've done your whole life to get anything done. Like, you move forward through any plant medicine ceremony or any of these spiritual practices through the surrender.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And like, that's where these plant medicines are so valuable, is they'll teach you these universal lessons, but they'll teach you in the microcosm of that one ceremony, where the more you try to fight ayahuasca, good luck, pack a lunch, because you're going to be in there.
You're going to be there for a while.
You're going to be there for a while. And then you let go, and then you learn the lesson, and you get to like assimilate it. So was that, for both of you, was that your first like really guided plant medicine experience, was doing the ayahuasca, or had you had some other kind of intentional experiences?
With that degree of like ceremony and guidedness and intention around it, yes.
We've done mushrooms with Jamie and Julie and Smith Mountain Lake, and we had dabbled in psychedelics, but not really. This was the first deep dive into that.
Right. And so what was that experience like? I remember bits of that, but we had a crew there, but what was that first experience like for you guys?
Yeah, I think, I'm always, some of like my core tenets are that I'm like, I question everything, but I'm also open to anything and everything, right? Like, I know that I don't know shit. Yeah. And so I always had that even back at that time. And so when you brought up the opportunity to go down there, and we had looked into it and we're like, hey, I feel called to like check this out and see what this is all about. And I had grown up, I've never drank still to this day. Like, I never drank alcohol, and I was always like anti-drugs or anything like that and real judgy about it. So I only started, smoking cannabis maybe a few years before that. And so to just jump right into like an ayahuasca experience, I had several friends who were like, that may be a bit much for you. I was like, let's just do it. Yeah, let's go. How weird can it get? Yeah. Turns out it can get pretty weird. And so I remember at that time, the experience was profound. And that was what I really took home from it, was that, okay, confirmed you don't know shit, and confirmed there's something else bigger going on than you are aware of, or that humans in general are even meant to be aware of. But like, it shifted me from like, I think all this mumbo jumbo is kind of, this is probably all BS, to like, okay, yeah, there's definitely something else going on that's way bigger than me. And this is interesting. I'd love to, try to tap into whatever this other level of reality is.
Yeah,
But that was it. That's all it, like, that was a big shift for me.
it made the opening perhaps for
Yes.
you to like receive some of the practices that
Yes.
you had already been kind of deepening on your own. But when you open up to that thing which is ineffable and cannot
it.
be explained and doesn't make sense in any of the strict materialist reductionist science books,
right.
and you feel that DMT chrysanthemum descend
Mm-hmm.
upon you, and you're like, oh shit, you know, like
okay.
there's some other things happening here. And when, you know, Maestro Alberto was singing Icaros to the bats and they started swirling around our Maloka,
Yes.
and we're like,
Yeah.
wait, he's singing songs to the bats and the bats are responding? Like, that's weird.
And the whole jungle would
And the
respond.
whole jungle was, the cicadas, everything was in rhythm, flowing
Yes.
together, like energetically connected, not only with the people, but with the whole ecosystem around us, which it becomes a profound experience that takes this idea from something that you think you know to something that you really know, like somatically. Like,
You've
I've
tasted the honey.
experienced this.
Yeah.
So that accelerates your journey. And I want to get to this next race. And I know there's plenty more to talk about that, but that definitely probably opened and then accelerated your own path.
Yeah, and recently we just got back from Costa Rica and Soltar, our most recent ayahuasca ceremony, and I wanted to track that as well. And I think we had not actually given reverence to ayahuasca and how it had, that particular plant had affected our relationship. Because even prior to that, I was doing the meditations and I was working with energy and a lot of these different practices, and he was certainly responding, but I would still say there was still a lot of trauma. There was still a lot of water under the bridge. I mean, it's 18 years we've been together this month, and you know, by this point we've been together 13 years at that point, and had not had a 100, had not been completely open with each other about everything that was going on underneath. And it was after ayahuasca that we really began to open up that and share at the most authentic level in our relationship. And everything shifted. Everything shifted at that point.
Yeah. Definitely a massive acceleration.
Yeah. So then here comes this giant story arc that brings you back to where we started, which is, and talk to us about how that idea for the Amazing Race and how some of your own practices that you'd learned helped kind of potentially, depending on your metaphysical viewpoint, again, it could be the nail in the tire, or it could be this, you know, forces working with you or against you, depending on your own resonance. Whatever you want to believe is fine. But tell us how this next chapter of Amazing Race started, and then kind of the intentions that you guys went into it, because I thought that was really rad, just talking to you guys about it even before you went.
So at this point, when we decided to watch the race with the boys, it was an interesting experiment for us because obviously it was very traumatic the first time. So we were curious. At this point, we had transformed our relationship. We had done a lot in personal development. We were curious to watch it and see how we responded and all the different things, right? The my ox is broken, all the famous scenes. And really everything was funny. It was like we were watching different people, you know? And it was a beautiful opportunity to share lessons with our boys. So when they're, you know, of course, Achilles, our oldest, watching the African scene, he looks at Dad. He's like, "Okay, Dad, that took it a little far. You had me until that."
Yeah. And it's like, hey, just so you know, you came from that dude, so you may want to take note.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That might be in you somewhere.
Yeah. That's
So
what
just
lack of awareness looks like.
keep an eye out for that.
That's
thing.
right.
And saying, hey, look, people do shift, because already at 12, our 12-year-old lives with a lot of shame and a lot of guilt of how he shows up, you know, and really holds that inside himself. So being able to see like, hey, people make mistakes. You can show up this way. There's unconsciousness, and you can learn and you can grow and you can evolve. So that was a beautiful thing that we were able to share with our boys. But by the time we're watching the season finale, we're in Jackson Hole for spring break. And I just here, we're on the mountain the next day. First of all, we watch the finale. We're feeling into, so when you're thinking of it vibrationally, like we are vibrationally in lock with like what it feels like to run the race. what it felt like, because they bring in all the feels. And by the time you do get to the finale, even though we came in second, it was like, we're remembering how beautiful the experience actually was. So the next day we're snowboarding and it just pops in my head, text Lynn. And so then I share with
Lynn
Colin.
Lynn is your producer.
Lynn is a casting director.
Who we hadn't talked to in 15 years. We didn't know she was still a casting director. But
Yeah.
And so he does while we're on the mountain. And by the way, we're on the mountain. This is a hedonic calendaring of ours, is one of the days that we go every year to Jackson Hole. He and I, just the two of us, we take MDMA and we go snowboarding on the mountain. So that's what's happening right now. Yeah.
And hedonic calendaring is something, for those of you who don't know, that Jamie Wheal, Stephen Kotler put forward in their book, Stealing Fire, which is kind of a cool idea of setting out intentional time to do some kind of awe-inspiring experience. And that would certainly qualify, I would have to say.
So we're really stacking it up, right?
Yeah.
The Teton Mountains have crystal caves all on the back. You've got all the snow. It's gorgeous. And we like to do it because it's just a creative opportunity too for us to go, what are we going to create together this year?
Sure.
And so during that time, I get this hit, text Lynn, and suddenly it's like, what if we went back on the race? What if? And so then right there on the mountain, he texted her, if you ever want to bring old racers on, we're in. Just so you know, they wanted us to do the original All-Stars. We were pregnant with Achilles, so we couldn't do it. Anyway, she says, thanks. That's that. But we go on to do a 5 senses reality on the mountain, what it would feel like, what it would taste like, what it would smell like if we were to go on the race.
All the boxes it would check.
Yeah, all the boxes. So things that I had been wanting to manifest, which was I wanted to travel more. I didn't want to plan the logistics. We're busy parents. I don't want to deal with all of that. I wanted to spend more time with Colin because we're really busy. We don't get the chance to do that. I wanted to get paid abundantly for being me. That was a big thing. I want to get paid abundantly for being me. And also, as a coach, you realize right away, you can read about this stuff in a book, but we all know this is about experience. This is really a show, not tell kind of thing. And I wanted an opportunity, having worked with different people, to really put myself in the ring and show this is what it looks like to maintain alignment no matter the conditions.
When you're not calling the shots and you're not controlling the experience, you're thrust into their reality.
Yeah, it's an opportunity for intention and surrender.
Yes.
Both.
Exactly.
Which is like that delicate balance.
That
Because
delicate
sometimes people
balance.
think that those are on the opposite sides. You either have one or the other. But
Hand in hand.
again, if you go into plant medicine, it is about intention and surrender. Set your intention, let go of your intention, allow the greater mind, allow the universe, whatever you want to call it, to take over and actually guide you to where you want to go, which may go on this windy road that you would never expect, but you trust and have the faith that you're going to arrive some way, somehow at your intention.
Exactly.
That's it. And that was being on the race.
Exactly. Exactly. We had to complete surrender, but in that space, we just started dreaming into what if we did this and just put it out there. 3 weeks later, they email us. As a matter of fact, we're already casting an All-Stars. This is
Only the third one in 20 years.
We're already casting an All-Stars series. And if you're interested in going on the show, you're in. And we leave in June. And it just so happened that June was already a month where our boys were going to be at camp for 3 weeks, at Grandma 1 for 2 weeks, and another grandma for a week. So we didn't even have to deal with logistics. And work-wise, you were slow. We kind of looked at it, and it was literally like the Red Sea sort of parted. And when it's something this big that I'm wanting to manifest, I am looking at, is it ease and grace? Am I having to force this to happen? Am I having to make this happen? Or is literally like it just sort of unfolding? Like, yeah, there's work that needs to be done and I need to, like, there's action that needs to happen. And at the same time, it's just sort of being handed to you. And the race was very obviously just being sort of handed to us, the way the idea came in and then the way we were then getting cast. And
it's just about getting your mind out of the way, right? Like a lot of us get those little signals that might come in like, oh, you should holler at so-and-so. And we're like, yeah, whatever, I'll get to it later.
That's right.
And then you don't get to it later. And then the moment passes.
Yeah.
And then that 3 weeks of casting that they had, you text them a month later and they're, oh, sorry, it's too late. It would have been great. We just did this thing. But
Exactly.
it's just getting the mind out of the way and listening to those little cues, the whispers that come, because it's always a whisper. Rarely is something shouting at you like, hey, text Lynn.
That's right. That's right.
exactly.
excellent.
That's
And
right.
you're like,
And then
"Oh,
it's
what?"
not till later when you look back on it and go, oh, wow.
Yeah.
It was big.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and we like to honor that when it happens.
For sure.
So, of course, when we go on the race, there we are at the starting line, with Phil, and he's about to do his 3, 2, 1 go, and we're looking around, and they've cast people from Survivor and people from Big Brother. So that was another interesting element to this particular All-Stars, is that it wasn't just former racers. It was CBS's other reality shows, which actually, shadowy human behavior really does well in those particular shows. You really kind of have to be conniving and be one way versus another and sort of out of integrity to play that game. And we had already decided, look, we may go out on the third leg. We have to just completely surrender to that. But we really want to put ourselves into this container and work at a more energetic sort of 5th dimensional level rather than just looking at that 3-dimensional physical, and see if we can influence the way the energy is working. And that sounds good in theory until you're actually on the line and you're about to do it.
For sure. But you had a commitment, even talking to you guys, you had a commitment to show the work that you'd been doing and to show your heart and to like show that to the other racers, if nothing else, show that hopefully through the cameras, through the storylines, through every lens that they might show them nothing but that love and that consciousness that you guys had cultivated. And you were going to show them that no matter what, and then trust that the outcome would be the outcome.
That's right.
But that was, it was like a deep commitment. It was a deep commitment that I saw in you guys.
That was the bigger intention of the whole thing, right? Is to be able to have the opportunity to put all this stuff, into real practice in this like really condensed way. So much of the manifestation practices and the sex magic and all this stuff that we do in our normal life.
You just dropped a word that we're going to have to get back to now. There was an opportunity that we were going to be able to skirt by that, but now not. It's like introducing a gun in a 5-act play. In Act 5, the gun has to go bang. So now you said it, so we got to make time for that at the end.
Yeah.
Yes.
So but in general in our life, there's all these different arcs, and we're like starting this project, and then this one's coming to an end. Like, we just had a big manifestation process come to an end today, actually, and we're going down to Grenada to experience it tomorrow. But like, there's always different arcs going on. And with the race, it was like this very finite amount of time. We're going to show up. We're going to be thrust into their game. We're not going to have text or email or phone or any communication with the outside world. Our whole job is to be as present and grateful and in this experience as possible. And we believe that the higher we're vibrating, so the more fun we're having, the more gratitude we're feeling, the more in love we're feeling with each other, the more good and awesomeness that we see in the other teams, like the more of those things that we bring in, the higher the likelihood is that we tune to that vibrational reality where we're crossing the finish line first. And we don't know exactly how that happens.
And that goes against all conventional strategy, right? Because as you said,
That's
like
right.
the most conniving and plotting and chess playing and
That's
like,
right.
oh yeah, we're your friends, but actually we're not your friends.
That's right.
Surprise.
And that's like down to like every city when we're flying into the next location where it's about to be race on, right? And we see all the other teams that are starting to get real shifty-eyed and starting to get that lizard brain, and they're looking at the other teams and they're talking about who are they going to U-turn or who might U-turn them. We're doing a gratitude practice where we're going team by team and talking about all the ways that we like and love individuals and teams. Even if they're hard to find, we're focusing on those things because we know that that's resonant with how we want to feel at the end of this leg. Yeah.
We know that, when you think about winning the race, if you're thinking of it in terms of sex magic, which we'll get to, or 5 senses reality, it's like, what does that look like? What does that feel like? And obviously it feels like joy. It feels like appreciation. It feels like love. It feels like bliss. So we know that if we can maintain that vibration as often as possible, we're creating momentum such that we become a cooperative component. So we're just a cooperative component. There is so much more going on, but at least there are multiple different realities out there, and many of those have Colin and Christie winning at the end of the day. So how can we, as one cooperative component, match that frequency? Well, let's get into love and gratitude and bliss as often as we possibly can. So yeah, starting each leg of the race, we would literally, it's called positive aspects, and we would think of all the ways in which we liked and loved each each team. And the thing is, we really genuinely, like, it's not like a positive thinking sort of thing. We genuinely loved these other teams, and they could feel it to such that when they U-turned us, because it turned out it was a U-turn vote, and all of these teams, unbeknownst to us that we had been working with, decide to U-turn us. We survive, and we actually beat all of those teams.
That was the same as what it used to be called a yield, right?
Exactly.
Like, it's a way to slow down the team that's racing
exactly.
well.
And what was
also encountered bovines on the leg where we got U-turned, which ran into the woods, and we had to redo the whole challenge. I mean, the whole thing was such a trip.
It's lost.
I mean, seriously.
But there's there's so many fractaled moments that were exactly like season 5. And so in this case, we get U-turned, and now we have to make a headdress for a cow, and it is a disaster. But instead of worrying about the cow being broken, we're like stay in flow state. That's really what we were getting into, each one of these legs, and start all over, and ended up beating all of those teams. But the next leg, we're with 2 of those teams on the plane. And they can tell that we genuinely forgive them. We genuinely do not resent them or hold it over their head. And it's like, hey, you're more than welcome to play the game any way that you want. And we honor that. And they could really feel it. And what started happening is these teams, they started shifting. So to the point where there's a team fun, and they had fun meters that they would wear, and it would kind of show where they were at on the fun meter. So by the finale, they're awesome and pretty high vibing team. But at the same time, they could feel that, it's one thing to put a happy face sticker on an empty gas gauge or to think positive. Like, this is true emotional vibration. Embodiment. Exactly. So these teams started wanting to learn more. So when you're not in the race, like behind the scenes, they start learning, like, okay, what are you doing? Are you're meditating? Okay, then there's this visualization. Like, they really start wanting to play the game at this level too. And Team Fun ends up making vibometers for us for the finale, literally vibometers. And this is like buttons that they sell on their website.
Well, I think they had this really interesting realization, because they U-turned us, because it was like, we're playing the game, how the game is designed to be played, which is you have the ability to slow down another strong competitor so that you can try and progress in the game. Like, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. But what they ended up realizing was that, and she shared this with us the next leg, she goes, man, we had the worst leg that we've had, because we were so in our head about being out of integrity with you guys, because we had talked about working together earlier that leg. Then we end up U-turning you, and we end up running a really slow leg. And we made all these stupid mistakes because we just weren't in it. We weren't vibing high because we were questioning our decision. We were not feeling good about the fact that we weren't in integrity. And so now I get it, how really all that matters is like, where are you vibing and what can you do to vibrate as high as possible? And like, doing something that you said you weren't going to do is not a way to like vibrate super high.
Yeah, we also have like an internal adjudicator that decides what we deserve based on our actions. Yes. And so we will find a way to self-sabotage ourselves if we don't believe that we've acted in the highest integrity. Like, we'll find a way to punish ourselves so that we can reach a level of like, okay, this is fair. Yep. So if we do something shitty, we'll call in shitty things to punish ourselves for that shitty thing that we are judging ourselves for, which is why, like, whenever I talk to people, like, forgiveness is one of the most crucial steps to even moving forward at all. Because if you don't forgive your past, you're going to keep punishing yourself for all the things you feel guilty about in your past. And so your life going forward is never going to change because you're still paying the retributions for what you feel guilty about.
Step one.
So it's like such a crucial lesson. And to see it plays out in every different field, but people don't talk about it or think about it as much, and it's cool. That's what was so cool about this experience is you guys got to do this in front of the whole country, in front of the country watching, where this wasn't like, Gaia TV.
No.
This is CBS Amazing Race.
This is reality television.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that was also very scary to surrender into, because when you're talking about playing an energetic game, right? Or more fifth dimensional. It's like they're looking at you like you have two heads. Now, by the time it's all said and done, there's a couple of producers asking, now, what was that book you said? Now, what was that website?
Yeah.
I'm interested, because you realize the proof is in the pudding, and they're kind of watching. And I think they were also watching the transformation of the other teams, because by the end, these teams that were U-turning us were teams that were actually helping us later in the season. And then the producers are kind of like, this is one of the strongest teams. Why would you even want to help them? But it was sort of like, actually what we've realized is collaboration over competition is really what's going to get us further in the game.
It's more effective.
Yeah, it's more effective. And that had really, it was a transmission. And that was really what we were wanting to do. We were wanting to do it with the other teams, but really we were wanting to do it with whoever it could speak to that was watching the show, was that this was a transmission that, you know, when you see someone run a 4-minute mile, suddenly other people can run a 4-minute mile.
Yep.
So a big part of, and we actually wrote our intention beforehand, and a big part of that was modeling a level 3 relationship. So that was really important to us, was to show the transmission of what a level 3 relationship looks like. So level 1 is kind of that tit for tat, what have you done for me lately kind of thing, the blame game, it's all your fault. Level 2 is where you see a lot of these more conscious relationships. You take care of you, I'll take care of me, we're good to go, and then we'll come together. And that's beautiful, and you can be great friends in that way, but there's really a lack of polarity. Level 3 is like, I actually get off on, like doing things for you, on getting you off. He gets off on getting me off. So we were really...
Now that's really confusing language after you've said the word sex magic, but whatever.
We're going into it. We're going into it. So this was the segue into the sex magic, because...
Wait, we gotta finish the race before we get it. We gotta leave people with the grand finale, because after we talk about sex magic, they're gonna be like, whatever.
Yeah.
All right. So you guys, one thing, like, you get all the way through practicing what your intention the whole way through. And I got to watch a lot of these. We go over to your house and watch these and watch this in action. But actually, like, the most compelling clip I saw was something you just showed me right before the podcast, which I hadn't seen yet, which was on the final leg, you're assembling like a drum kit. And you have to get it exactly immaculately perfect. And you got sweat like perfectly dripping off your brow. Like, you guys have been working on this thing for what, 2 hours, you said?
Yeah.
At least.
And so it's us and another team.
Yeah.
We both have our drum sets completely completed. Other than, like, we're both missing some little detail. And it's just, who's going to figure out the detail first and go win $1 million?
And in that moment, I watch you, and it's actually on your Instagram for people who want to see this. That was your Instagram, right? You're actually saying, like, okay, take a breath. Like, allow that greater knowing, the help from the angels, the guides, the universe, allow that to telepathically transmit exactly what you need to do. And you just go...
Which was so hard. That felt like an hour-long breath in that moment. Because my ego was just like, no, we need to solve the problem right now. But it was just this trust in Christie and going, okay, we've been trying it this way for 2 hours now. Let's try to just take a breath and try to get out of beta and, like, drop in for a moment. And that's where the meditation practice allows you to just, in a single breath, you can kind of calm your nervous system down. Yeah, it was.
And then, okay, this is a minute Instagram clip, by the way. So you go through this whole process, take the hour-long breath, which was only actually a breath.
4 seconds.
And then immediately go straight to the problem.
And that's legitimately how it happened.
Yeah,
like,
it's an uncut. I mean, it's not cut.
Yeah, that, like, as soon as we just calmed it down, it was like, oh, what's that little lever right there? Click, boom, done, win $1 million.
Yeah.
Wild. It was like the final test. It was like the final exam.
It was the final exam. Can you practice all those things in this heightened of a situation? Because it was like every leg leading up to it, all you had to do was stay in, right? So, like, it's okay. I don't really need to win this leg. We only won a couple of legs along the way because it was like, hey, let's just be up toward the front. It's all good. Well, now it's the last leg. And to not be attached to winning on that leg was super difficult for me.
Yeah, that's $1 million.
That's $1 million.
Yeah,
that's what we're here for. We made it to the last leg, and if you go and be like, whatever, and get second or third, well, then you didn't win $1 million. And so that ego part of me is like, no, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to get this done. And yeah, can you, in that heightened of a situation, do the counterintuitive thing of just slowing it down, taking a breath, and trying to broaden your perspective a little bit to let whatever else come in, and it was it definitely increases your faith.
For sure. Because also throughout the race, what you talk about, there's no time and people can't really understand that. But on the race, it was very easy to, when we were in the middle of a challenge and it was so difficult, you could, in that time and space, imagine yourself and all your friends and family at home on the couch watching this play back. And it was happening both at the same time. And I knew in the case of the drums that they're highlighting, because this is what the show does, it highlights the one little thing that it seems so obvious to the audience at home, but obviously it's not to the people in the game. And I knew, and I could imagine people on the couch like yelling, "It's the lever." So he mentions angels and guides, and it's whatever you want to call it, but essentially you're opening up to this infinite intelligence where all information exists. And it's like, if people are at home yelling to us what it is, it's the whisper. Yeah. Call in, right? It's the whisper. It's the lever. And I knew I was likely not going to figure that out. I'm not an engineer. Like,
I just had a Hodor moment, actually.
Dude,
when
I
she
know. I did
just
too. Just then.
She's like,
whoa, man. There's so many things like that, dude. Seriously.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh, the door.
Man.
Oh, the door.
Yes. Dude, I'm like goosebumps all over right now because the number of those. That's hilarious. I had the same moment.
So, and I thought also, speaking of that level 3 relationship, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
Because it's the masculine, feminine sort of working together, right? It's this sort of like masculine doer. And it's this feminine like, hey, let's just take a breath. Let's just get into this creative space and to more alpha and see if we can access this information that's right there in front of us. Like, it's right there. We have access to it. We just have to become the cooperative component. And I mean, it was just amazing to see it, because the moment you took that breath, you looked over, you saw the lever, you flipped it up, and that was that.
That was it.
Off you go. And then you get to have that play out in this whole arc for the world to see. And all the people who might have been skeptical if you guys went in with that intention and all that. Now there's an example of this style of living in this kind of cooperative, energetically positive, gratitude, state that you were in, actually causing a tangible effect of you guys winning the race. Yeah. And that's a pretty cool thing. And still there could be doubters and skeptics. Oh, well, they were always really good. They were going to win no matter what and whatever.
Yeah, but what happens when 2 or 3 other teams employ that same strategy and it starts working more and more often?
Right. And that's the thing, like the tipping point of this type of practice, which, fighters, I talk to a lot of fighters, every one of them visualizes, the great ones, the great champions visualize themselves with the belt. You talk about the 5 senses reality. Like when I was with TJ Dillashaw before he beat Renan Barao, like he felt himself receive the belt, win it, heard the audience. I could feel all that. Same with Cody, same with like all the champions that have surprisingly gone on to win. They've felt it. They've they've known somewhere that was the reality that they were going to enter. It just hasn't happened yet. And I think that's like a key factor. And that's something that we don't typically apply to our lives, but we should, because
it's where it's at.
And if we
feel the coldness of the metal on the belt in your hand, and feel the sweat dripping down your face.
The smell of the leather on the belt, like whatever, every little aspect of the feel of the canvas under your feet.
That's like my whole indicator is the more real I can make it in vision, that's when I start knowing, oh wow, this is going to happen, because I can more quickly access being there on the thing or at the place, or and it's like, the faster I can put myself there and the more real that vision is of it, that's when I'm like, oh, wow, this is going to happen.
So
and then that signals everything in your body that actually gets you in that ideal state. It ties into so many elements. Dispenza talks about it a lot with health, but also some other different aspects. But it's the same thing with winning a championship, with improving your health, there's just different parts of the machine that have to work to make this happen. And I encourage people who haven't listened to my podcast with Joe Dispenza, check it out.
Yes.
And because he talks about the epigenetic triggers that happen when you live in the state of health rather than living in the state of the disease that you're currently suffering in, or whatever the current state versus the future state that you're trying to create.
Yeah,
That's right.
it all starts in the imagination. It's really what you're bringing forward, right? That's like the ethers, what Onnit talks about on your podcast as well with her. She kind of lays that out. By the time we get to the finish line, that was such an interesting experience because there wasn't this sort of like newness to it. It was literally like we were inside of a dream, like we had lived it so many times. Oh, here we are. This is exactly what I had imagined. And we kind of had a leg up having run the race and having ran to the finish line and knowing what that was like, even in second place. We could kind of feel what it would be like in first place.
And that's all sex magic is. When we refer to sex magic,
Good segue, because we only got about 9 minutes before we got to get out of here. So
it's no different than what Joe talks about with, get yourself into this state of, no self, no time, kind of, vibrating as high as possible, unity, consciousness, tapped into infinite intelligence, whatever that state is that you can get to through meditation. Well, you can also get there through different sex practices, right? And different, tantric practices that we do. And so when you obviously sex is the energy that brings life into the physical world, right? And so it's a pretty potent energy. And if you can harness that energy and get to those heightened states, then do your 5 senses visualization, 5 senses reality, and feel the canvas under your feet and smell the leather in that state of super elevated vibration. And then you're doing it co-creatively, and you're looking into each other's eyes, and you're literally painting the picture of the reality that's going to exist as you run through the tunnel, as you run up to the mat, and as the teams are cheering for you and they're happy that you won. Like when we're doing those practices all throughout the race. And it gets to the point where it becomes so real in those practices that, when it actually happens, it's like, like it was not ever going to happen any other way.
I've been here before.
And we would feed off of, there is an elation, each leg of the race, the cycle of that. So the beginning is sort of like fighting lizard brain, right? Everyone's getting into it and no one's talking to each other and everyone's all shifty-eyed, and we would have to, that was probably the most difficult to really stay in alignment. Once the leg starts, you kind of see where you're at, you're kind of ahead of the pack.
And you're in the action, you're doing the thing.
Exactly. Yeah. But then when you realize, oh, we just won that leg or we're safe, the high that you're on, you are riding a high like no other. That's the perfect time to start manifesting. That's the perfect time to segment in 10 and start visualizing what the next leg of the race is going to be. And lock it in. Yeah, and lock it in. And it was interesting because we would have to fine tune that as time would go by because, part of our intention finding alignment no matter the conditions. Well, after the leg of the race, we'd look and go, oh, that's why we got 2 hours behind. Fuck, because you can't show alignment if you're in first place the whole time. You got to actually get behind and then show people that you can find your way back in, regardless of
the hardship.
Exactly, regardless of the conditions. But we would really use that state to manifest, and then the sexual state. So Colin did not come the entire time on the race.
For like 2 weeks leading up and then the entire time on the race.
And I will say that what really, for one thing...
But I had not yet been able to achieve the non-ejaculatory orgasm, which I was aiming to try and get to before this experiment started.
For sure.
And I hadn't quite reached that yet. And so it was just basically getting super, super turned on and having lots of sex. And Chrissy being like, we have to stop now. And I'm like, okay. And so let's use this heightened energy. But that was interesting.
But what was great about it is that obviously that juice, that energy living in him is really being manifested and aimed toward the actual race. But also it really kept us really hot for each other, because there is no relief. There's no like, okay, now there's the buildup of the energy. Like the energy is building over time. So,
So if you look at like what Joe Dispenza teaches, he teaches a deep meditation, the open space meditation to get you to basically a zero state to manifest from. And that's one way to do it, to get you to a state of quiet, a state of stillness from which you can meditate from. But that state of pleasure, actually, like when you're in a state of pleasure, like the state right before orgasm or orgasm around there, that is also a state of stillness where there's basically one note that's going through your whole body, no other thoughts or anything like that. And it's almost
and you can get into a place of just observing it.
Exactly.
And like you're tasting the metallic taste of, a DMT trip in that state. I mean, it's like,
it's like the most unified. I mean, if you do a 5-MeO DMT experience, it feels like a merge with the unicity of all things, in which you're just the singular note of like the universe compressed into a thumbnail of quantum potentiality where the Big Bang erupted from. Like you feel like you're part of that, and it's like one note. It's like everything at the same time. Well, as a human, we can get there. Okay, maybe we can get there through doing 5-MeO. Maybe we can get there through getting to like a zero state in the deepest meditation of emptiness. Or we always kind of get there at the moment of orgasm, like we feel it's such an overwhelmingly singular experience that you surrender to that moment for one moment. And that break is something that we live for. It's the pleasure, but it's also, wow, the relief of the one note of like unicity with self and ideally unicity with your partner at that point, that kind of
extend that
merger.
moment.
Okay, yeah, and then draw it out and then use that energy to manifest from, just like you would use the zero state energy to manifest.
But what's 100%. And then what's awesome is that afterwards, 5-10 minutes later, when you lay in bed and do a 0 point meditation, that's like some of the quietest, stillest 0 point meditation state I've ever been to is after a sex magic practice. So you ride the high of it, and then you go into a super still 0 point state where you're just like, it's all there. And you see how it's all connected. And like it's like, that's some of the most profound space I've ever been in.
Wow.
And doing it together. So that's the other thing. It's kind of like wherever two or more are gathered. I mean, certainly sex magic you can do on your own, but really when you are in partnership with someone where both, heart and pussy are connected, that is very potent, and it's the feminine polarity that really carries the depth that you can go to. And so when she can fully surrender, when she has full trust, that energy that can be created that you can start to access, you have to experience it to know it, but it feels like a 5-MeO experience, but all you've done is had sex.
Yep. I get it. And it's points the way for people curious.
So thanks for taking us down to Peru 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, fam. And also another interesting thing, and I know I got to run here. I got a call I got to get on, which is crazy because we're doing a podcast, which is way more important, but nonetheless, life beckons. But, Whitney and I have gone through our own transitions, and you guys have held the space for us through all that. And, we're in a beautiful place right now. So I just want to also, not only for the lessons that you brought the audience, but also for just holding the space and loving her always, no matter what, and loving me always, no matter what. Just the deepest gratitude and appreciation to both of you guys for that as well.
Man,
deep gratitude for you. Deep gratitude for both of you guys. And
for
Whitney.
taking care of my little sister.
Yeah,
thank you, brother. Sure. Yeah, you have. You've really held space for her, and it's been such a calming feeling knowing that you've got her. So
we've never doubted that through whatever transition of the relationship. Like you can feel the deep bond. That level of friendship, that level of tribe, that level of family, and that goes nowhere, regardless of wherever you're at in the relationship. Exactly.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
thank
to
you,
the
brother.
end. It's to the end. I love you guys. Thanks
Love
for coming
you.
on. You guys got
brother.
a website too to point people to?
ColinandChristie.com, Colin Guinn on Instagram, Christie Woods 1 on Instagram.
Boom.
We got a free course. It's all the low hanging fruit shit that got us from 0 to 1.
Cool.
Yeah, there's some tantra practices in there, some fun stuff to learn about if you're curious and want to learn a little bit.
Orgasmandmeditate.com.
There you go.
Dude, I'm buying it right now before this goes live.
Yeah, there it is. All right.
Awesome.
Love you guys. Thanks so much.
Love you too, brother. Thanks.
Bye.
I've been a fan of Kettle and Fire bone broth for many years. First of all, because it's really hard to make your own bone broth. First, you got to start with grass-fed bones, which aren't the easiest things to get. And then you got to cook them for like 3 days. And that takes an immense amount of effort, and Kettle and Fire does it for you. And they're great. And then they started coming out with flavors like their mushroom and chicken. And then they started coming out with soups like this chili, which contains the bone broth and a bunch of other awesome things. And when they started coming out with soups, well, that's when I got really excited. So today I'm gonna make you one of my favorite recipes, which is a deconstructed chili dog. The deconstructed chili dog recipe is about as easy as it gets. We're gonna take 2 organic hot dogs, we're gonna slice them up and saute them in the pot that we're gonna actually cook the chili. We're gonna open up a box of the kettle and fire, then we're gonna grate some cheese, and then we're gonna add some moon cheese, which is dehydrated cheese for crunch, and then some organic sour cream, put it all in a bowl, and there you go. So I'm cooking for the team today, so we're gonna use 6 chili dogs and 3 boxes of chili. So here I go cutting them dogs. So now put the dogs straight in the pot. Great thing about hot dogs is you don't need to put any oil or butter or anything because dogs are fatty enough as they are. So we're gonna let these saute for a little bit, start to brown before we put the chili in. In the meantime, I'm gonna grate the cheese. Cheese is grated. All right, so we got the hot dogs sauteing, and now I'm gonna put in the kettle and fire chili. Pro tip, hit the flaps, squeeze it, and then shake it. And then all you gotta do is rip open the top. Super easy, way better technology than cans. Like, cans are out, this is in. And you get that open, put that in. And then again. So keep the chili and the dogs simmering until it's hot because everything's already cooked. The bone broth is already in there. You got all the grass-fed meat and the grass-fed hot dogs all simmering in one pot. All right, now I'm gonna plate my soon-to-be world-famous deconstructed chili dogs. Oh yeah. Perfect. Leaving some for off-camera utilization. So there it is. You got the chili in the bowl, easy enough. Grab some of the raw grass-fed cheddar, splash that in there, let it melt right on top of the chili. There, big dollop of the organic sour cream. Boink. One more. I need like my signature sound, you know, like Emerald has bam, you know, like yoink didn't really cut it. So I'll work on that for my future cooking videos. And then for crunch, because everything needs crunch, but we want to keep this keto AF. So we're using moon cheese so that everything is abiding by that higher fat, higher protein, lower carb mentality. Sprinkle that in. And there you have it, folks. Deconstructed chili dogs. My favorite. I've literally made it like 3 out of the last 4 times I possibly had a chance to do that. And there's witnesses. It's the best. It's so good. And like once you have it once, it's amazing. And if you want to get really freaky, like I'm talking really freaky, then you can put some like organic Fritos in there. And then you got like a deconstructed chili dog Frito pie. Thanks to Kettle and Fire for these amazing soups and amazing recipes. And I hope you guys like it. Let me know what you think. And now the best part, you get to eat it. Make sure I get a hot dog on this bite. That's the key. A little bit of everything. Oh yeah.